Hey, y'all, welcome back to the Unlikely Disciples. My name is Della Chris, and this is just a podcast where we talk real life, what it's like following Jesus. And this week we are talking about 4 weekly spiritual disciplines that I'm implementing into my life that are really just changing my life. We are pulling it from the book, The Common Rule. And I'm holding it. I was kind of shaking it, but here it is. If you're watching me on YouTube so you can see it, I will link it below if you're interested in that. Now, this week we're talking all about the weekly rhythms, the weekly habits that you can implement. In my previous podcast, we talked about the daily habits that you can implement. So if you have not watched the daily habits, the 4 daily habits that I've implemented, please stop here, go back and watch that one first, and then come back here, because I really think those habits really kind of laid down the framework. So we're going to dive into the weekly habits. But first, I want to tell you guys, this morning, me and my husband were talking when we woke up, and he was telling me about this basketball player. And apparently somebody asked him, like, what's your style? And the guy was like, I don't have a style. Like, I used to not be able to afford clothes. So now I wear the free clothes that I guess the team gives him. Y'all know I'm not into sports. So he'll wear like his slides and his like Adidas shorts or whatever. And apparently he only lives off of his endorsements. Like, he doesn't live off the salary that he gets paid as a basketball player. And people are just they're just flipping out. They're so intrigued by it, and they think it's like strange or all these things. They're like, man, why does he have style? And it's just very interesting to me. Like, I was telling my husband that we're so used to living in excess as Americans that it's weird when a multimillionaire says, oh, I'm only going to live off of a few millions instead of my like complete salary. And now this is an extreme example, but it reveals so much in our hearts. And I feel like that's another reason why like this common rule book is so important. So I want to start off by showing you guys the diagram first with the habits in it. Okay, so if you're watching, you can see the habit wheel, and I just want to show it to you because it's so helpful. And then he breaks down the habits as a way, there's 2 ways. He breaks it off as a way to resist things that aren't good for us or to embrace things. So there's like a arrow pointing, and one side we talked about last episode is that one side of it is to love your neighbor and love God. Well, the other arrow that's going up and down is to embrace things that are good for us or to resist things that maybe we need to limit. And a good way the author of the book puts it is the freedom of limitations. Now, there are a few things he shares about the importance of habits, and I want like just kind of like the science, and I want to share that with y'all. But first, I realized in the last episode, I didn't give you guys a lot of the backstory of this guy, and I think that's important because it shows just how like the desperation that he had to come up with these habits and how it can be important and used for your life as well. So this guy he was like a Chinese missionary, and he seems like just a very driven person, and like, I'm gonna get it done. I want to give my best work. It's just how he's wired. And so I really related to that because I feel like that's just how I'm wired. And so much so that it can, for him and for myself as well, it can almost slip into sin. Let's just call it what it is. It can slip into sin. And so he was kind of like on his last he was just like, listen, having panic attacks, couldn't sleep. There was a moment when he was a missionary where he just like was sick, like just physically things started to like come up on his body because he wasn't resting. He didn't have good habits and routines in place. And so when he became an attorney, he's like, it's the same thing, right? It's one of those careers where nobody's going to stop you from overworking. No one's going to say, oh no, don't work that much. You almost get celebrated for working more than you're supposed to. And so his life started to unravel. He couldn't go to sleep. He's like super honest, and I appreciate it. He couldn't go to sleep without drinking. Like, it just became this whole thing, and to the point where it made him pause. So with the drinking, he ended up having a panic attack and all these things. So he just needed something to just like recalibrate his life, take him back to like, hey, what are the basics? So that's kind of where these habits and stuff are birthed out of. Now, let me read for you some of just some things that we've heard before, but we need to hear it again. The importance of our habits. We constantly have to remember this. So I'm going to read some of the things that he talks about here. He said a keystone habit, a micro shift that is something that brings about macro effects. Didn't think that a few habit shifts would change my life, but I was willing to try anything. And this is when he hit his low. And this is where he's talking about habits. And he said, I had no idea how much my ordinary habits were shaping my soul in the most extraordinary ways. I had no idea how much my life was being formed by my habits instead of my hopes. So it's one thing to have hopes for something, but if our habits don't line up, like, it's not happening. And then on page 7, he talks about, as far as our habits go, the invisible reality is this: we are living according to a specific regimen of habits, and those habits shape most of our life. A habit is a behavior that occurs automatically over and over and often unconsciously. A study from Duke University suggests that as much as 40% of the actions we take every day are not the products of choices, but of habits. The problem is that much of what is fundamentally shaping our existence is happening unconsciously. This is why it's important to put the right habits in place. So this section right here is real interesting. The science and theology of habits. When a habit is formed, the brain stops fully participating in decision making, which is scary, but also very powerful, right? Habits allow us to put our brains to better use. And so that means, like, if I have the right habits in place, then I can use my brain to actually create and do these things. This is really useful in general, but it has downsides. First, if we're acting out a bad habit, one that reinforces an addiction, a harmful pattern of thought, or encourages mindless submission to technology, which we talked about in the last episode, right? That's a problem. And second, because our unconscious choices form us just as much, if not more, than our conscious ones. We can become formed in patterns that we would never consciously choose if we were aware of them. This is a difference between what we call education and formation. This is so good. So education is what you learn and know, things you are taught. Formation is what you practice and do, things that are caught. The most important things in life, of course, are caught, not taught. And formation is largely about all the unseen habits. This is why when you hear people talk about discipleship and then you hear them talking about spiritual formation, this is why spiritual formation is so important. Because if I'm walking with a new believer and I can tell them, hey, listen, I'm not trying to, and this is where it's scary when people are like, I don't want to be religious. I don't want to be religious. Listen, some of the stuff I'm teaching you is not because I want you to be religious. It's because I understand the power of habits. If you can get the right formation in place, it will constantly bring you to a place where you're encountering Jesus, where you're getting on your knees, you're practicing humility, you're doing all these things. And so I thought this was so good how he broke down the difference between education and formation. Like, I can educate you all day long on the things of God, but if you never get in a place where you are catching or you know what I mean, you're in a place where you catch the things that actually allow someone to live a life submitted to Jesus, then you're missing out on a lot of this. So that's the importance of habits. And then he talks about the slavery of freedom. This is so good. And I'm going to go to page 10 and 11. Another good quote on page 11, he talks about, but what if the good life doesn't come from having the ability to do what we want, but having the ability to do what we were made for? What if true freedom comes from choosing the right limitations, not avoiding all limitations? So a lot of times we think in order to be free, we don't want nobody telling us what to do, but no, true freedom comes from having the right limitations in place. And that's the whole idea of like why these habits have given me so much freedom. So when I tell y'all implement these habits have changed my life, that's what I'm saying. Like, it just gives me freedom because I'm like, I don't do that. Or I do this. You know, I do this 3 times a day. I need to make space for this. This is what I do. This is what I don't do. And this frees me up. I feel free in my mind. And I thought about too where Justin and I, the guy right here that produced my podcast, was talking about just how, like, when you look at other countries or other people who have less, sometimes you watch how they move, right? And it's like, oh, it looks like they have less than us, but the reality is because they have less things just like overwhelming them, they're at peace. And so technically, do they have less or do they have more than us? All right. The number one habit, I know I said all that, but I think it was important, y'all, to build up why it is that implementing these habits is important, because nobody's going to make you implement these habits. But now you see like the importance of these habits, how they're transforming my life and how they can transform yours, because you are putting these limitations on your life. So let's jump into the weekly habits. Number 1 is a 1-hour conversation with a friend. I love this because I personally struggle with this. When you start having young kids, really even I saw this pattern in college for myself, particularly. Like if it is exam week, my friends will be like, girl, where do you go here? I'm like, yeah, I go here. I don't have time for y'all's foolishness. I am in the lab. I am in the library studying for this exam. And so naturally when I started having kids, and all my kids, we had them back to back, the first thing to go for me was friendship. Not friendship like I dropped all my friends and all of that, but just kicking it and kicking. No. I'm about to do what I need to do to keep these kids alive. And the Lord sees that, and there's seasons for that. However, those are the same seasons too, where deep friendship can really bless your life. And so I really love how he says this. And one of the things that he talks about is how deep friendship, it just reveals so much about Jesus and the gospel. And this can be anything from, I don't know, going on a walk. And one of the things I do, like one of my friends, she's in school right now. She's in Louisiana. She's in med school in Louisiana. And so we just walk and talk for an hour. And it just blesses both of our lives so much. Sometimes he talks about how it can be a weekly setup between a group of 3 friends where you're like, every week we're getting together for an hour to touch base on our week. Now, that is not realistic for the life that I'm living right now. But I imagine, because he talks about we meet up for coffee. That's something that he does. My husband, he has a friend he connects with every Friday on the phone, and they talk about their week. That's really big. Whatever you can do to make it look, and especially if you have kids, he talks about how play dates don't really count. But sometimes that's all you can get. You know what I mean? So if you have kids, you're at home with your kids, you're the primary caregiver for your kids. Sometimes just having I remember just having another adult in the room would just bless my life for the week. And so having that, or let the dads take care of the kids, moms go connect and then switch. That's an option. But just a weekly 1 hour minimum conversation with a friend. Now, this story really hit home for me when he gave this example of he had a friend. Apparently there was a group of 3 of his friends. If you read it, and you're like, girl, that ain't how it went. It's close. There was 3 friends in the group. Well, 2 of the friends got really bad news about one of the friends. So it was a moral failure or something like that. The way he describes it is they got this news about the friend, and him and his other friend that were in the room, it kind of just took the air out of the room, and they were just like looking at each other. And yes, they were grieving what they heard about the friend, but there was just this, like, you couldn't deny it thing between both of them, to where it's like, is there anything that you're hiding from me? That's the question that he asked. And I don't know if he asked it or they just kind of told each other, hey, like, are we keeping any heavy, big secrets from each other that we need to tell each other? And they left like, no, we're good. We're not keeping any secrets. Great. I think they were like having a drink or something. Well, the next day, the friend comes and like knocks on his door, the guy that wrote the book. And this is the friend that he was sitting in that room with. And apparently, like, he's like, I need to talk to you. And so the wife takes the kids, they go sit on the porch, and the friend just confesses something heavy that he's been carrying. I don't know if it's addiction. He doesn't obviously tell us what it is. But in that moment, he was able to be such a good friend to his friend. And that came from him having just this vulnerable conversation with his friend. And so when you think about the main goal of this 1 hour conversation, because I think sometimes we can be so surface with people, and some people, that's wisdom, right? Some people, you don't let them all the way into your life. But when we're talking about deep gospel-centered friendships, there has to always be someone in your life that you allow to see deeply into your life. And truly, if we're being real, if we believe the gospel, if we believe that we're made for community, like, this has to happen in believers. And so the main goal, I like his wording of it. I'm gonna read it on 105. The idea is to cultivate a keystone habit of being vulnerable, relational person you were created to be, even when life becomes complicated. And so that was just deep conviction to me of like, yes, life is complicated. Life is busy, but how can I fight for this? How can I make room for this? How can I be intentional about this? And then when I do have that 1 hour conversation with a friend, it holds me accountable. Like, this cannot stay surface level the entire time. Is there anything that I need to share with this friend? Is there anything that this friend needs to share with me? Is there any way I can be praying for them? Is there any trenches that I need to jump in with my friend? This is that friend group, right? Like, I'm willing to jump in these trenches with you, because I think one of the things that's making us very ineffective as believers is the fact that so many of us, and yes, we confess our sins to Jesus. We don't need someone to go through. This is not going to turn into a theological debate or anything like that. But there is this need for, if I have someone that I can tell that I am struggling with something, then I'm not feeling like putting all this effort into being fake, putting all this effort into putting up this front instead of actually walking into my actual freedom. And so I think, to his point, if we get in the rhythms of every week, I am looking someone in the face that I don't need a lot to, that doesn't control my check, that doesn't, like, there's so many elements to this deep friendship, and that takes time. A lot of us won't go through the awkward weeks or the awkward months or the awkward years of building something where I can confess something to someone. I remember one of my own friendships, I was like, you know what? I just got to the point where I was like, I feel like I just need to encounter God on a new level, or God is wanting to do something in my life and break through things, but I just feel like I need to confess things off of my chest. And so I just called a friend. I said, come over, like, just come over. We come into the house, we're eating or whatever. After that moment, we were able to pray with each other. And it really is friendship. Deep friendship really is a way to share and display the gospel. And you can only do that when it is baked into your rhythms and routines, because I will run and not make room for friendship. And that is a problem. And when I see it as a spiritual problem, a threat to the gospel, then it comes with such a higher level of conviction. It becomes so much more of a priority in my time and all of that. And one more thing about the friendship thing I will say too is it does draw people to Jesus. And so where maybe I'm like, oh, I got to do this, check. And sometimes, like, the Lord can be like, I just need you to be a friend, or I need people to witness true friendship. Sometimes even the person's not called to be your friend, but they're called to witness your friendships, how you care and love for your friends, and how you know what I mean? How you interact. So many people now, I don't know what it is, but they don't know what true friendship looks like, and they don't know how to experience it. They don't know how to feel it. They don't know how to hurt and then keep moving forward. And so I think this is such a good weekly habit. All right. Number 2 is curated media for 4 hours. This one was also, like, very challenging for me because I'm not a big TV watcher, right? Or I feel like sometimes fiction books are a waste of my time. But it just gave me a new outlet. So he talks about, with all the media available to us, he talks about walking into this bookstore and there were just so many books. And he realized there's going to be more books in my lifetime than I could ever consume. And then now you talk about Netflix, YouTube, Hulu, all of these different things. There's more movies in our lifetime than we could ever consume. And so you can get in this consumer hamster wheel. And so the other extreme of that is what I do. I'm like, I'm good, right? Or then I went to, like, okay, I'll watch some stuff on the weekend, but watching with new intention. Because he talks about how if you watch curated media, we're designed to enjoy stories. And he talked about how choosing your media carefully, to where he's a white man, and he talks about how choosing his media carefully means that he is intentional about watching things from the perspective of maybe a Black American and a Black American, because he's like, that's not my experience. So if I can watch good stories, like, good stories are meant to transform us. You think about the Bible is a collection of stories, right? And so it's just like, man, Jesus told stories and all of these things. And I'm like, okay, so when I change it from the perspective, like, I'm wasting time, to curated stories. And he talks about, too, bringing along people with you, like watching a movie with your children. And y'all like, Della, this is not revolutionary, but it is revolutionary to me because it's a habit that's intentional versus we're vegging out. Because when I see vegging out, I'm very like, whoa, I don't like that. But when you change it to, no, me and my family are going to watch a movie. So his wife will have a list of, like, the best ranked movies. She'll do research. She'll find, like, articles and stuff like that really pull all the information for them. So they're not just scrolling endlessly on Netflix. They're being very intentional about it. Another thing he mentioned that might be helpful for some people is just timing. Do a time audit of your media for the week, including podcasts, all of the things. Like, how much time do I want to dedicate to this? And then just making the habit of just maybe shrinking that down. He recommended 4 hours. Number 3, fasting for something for 24 hours. I want to read to you a little bit of what he says about fasting He talks about feasting and fasting on page 128. We were made to feast, not in order to become full, but because we are full. We are to celebrate that fullness by feasting. Feasting to fill the emptiness is not feasting, it is coping. But the fall changed everything, of course, eating included. And the best way to understand the fall is to say that we take the good things God has given us and we make them God instead, which is why he recommends fasting as a weekly habit. I want to also talk about, he came for, like, he talks about fasting in a way that honestly I didn't think fully about. So he talks about we eat, let me read page 129. We eat to try to fill our emptiness. This is why fasting is mentioned so often in the Bible. Fasting is a way to resist the original sin of trying to eat our way to happiness and force ourselves to look to God for our fullness. He talks about in fasting, what begins with experiencing the emptiness of our stomach ends in experiencing the emptiness of the world. In the Bible, fasting is not just to reveal and clarify our own need for God. It is to lean into the suffering of the world itself and long for God to redeem it. This is where I never thought of fasting in this way. Like, just he talks about how whenever he's fasting, he's thinking about the injustice in the world. He's thinking about just all the things going on. Like he says, when we fast, we become more attuned to the stubborn reality of the world's suffering. And I'm like, man, that's so different. He talks about how where he lives is a place of privilege. And then when he goes right across the street, like literally on a walk, he talks about, say, when he hits a right is where he goes to work. When he hits a left is this very, like, y'all know what I mean, high crime, what some people call the hood, right? High crime, cops you hear sirens all the time, all of these things. And he talks about how it's not until he's fasting that he takes a moment to think like, wow, let me go this way. Let me pray. And he talked about how he couldn't even muster up the strength to fully go over there, but he sat on a bench to where he could see all the brokenness. And he talks about how fasting slowed him down enough to do that. And so for me, that is one of the things that I want to start incorporating. Not just, I do fast often, but not just fasting. Like, Della, when you're fasting, what is it that you are seeing differently in the world? How are you getting outside of yourself to see the world differently, to see the world through a spiritual lens? That was really good for me. And he also talks about, when it comes to fasting, how you can do it in community. You can do sun up to sundown. Y'all know all these different things. There's so many videos about fasting. But if you're implementing this as a weekly rhythm and routine, you don't necessarily have to start with, oh, I'm going to hit a 24-hour, I'm not about to eat all day fast. You can just pick something and start from there. All right, the fourth and final habit is the Sabbath. This is the hardest one for me to implement because of the nature of, well, let's be real, the nature of how I'm wired, but also the nature of what my husband does for work, what I do for work. And so my husband is in season, football season, he works legit 7 days a week and he doesn't have control over that. And then I'm on staff at our church, so I would work a Sunday, whereas even here in the book, he talks about taking his Sundays very slow. Well, that's not a reality for our household. And then we have the 4 kids, and then just the reality of what it's like to parent young children. I'm going to hit that in a minute because people don't talk about that enough when they talk about Sabbath. And I love just the practical advice he gives for them. The simple quote he gives for Sabbath, he says, it is just that God is God and we are not. That's the idea of a Sabbath. And on page 147, he talks about how we look at our work, especially in America, it makes it hard for us to Sabbath because we feel we have to prove we're important. We live in a culture that can't accept the Sabbath, right? We do not believe that work is from God and for your neighbor. That's one thing he always says. He says, work is from God and it's for your neighbor. Instead, we believe that it's from us and for us. Our careers define us. And so this is the problem. So we look at how we Sabbath or we don't Sabbath is because of these like deep-seated beliefs in us. So another quote that he says about the Sabbath that I love is, our souls need more than to do nothing. They need to do restful things. In this sense, real rest takes real work. And I love that he said that because sometimes people will be like, oh yeah, this is my Sabbath, so I'm about to lay on a couch and just play video games all day. And something about that would always just be like, I'm like, man, I'm not trying to be judgy, but that's not giving Sabbath to me. Now, sometimes I guess that's what you need. Like you just need to I don't know, erase yourself from the earth. I don't know. But he talks about this idea of like, they would have to figure out what really restores our soul. Like, and sometimes we're going to go and walk and enjoy the lake. Like, that takes work, but it's still Sabbath rest for us. He also mentions this idea. It was a quote in the beginning of, I can't remember who said the quote, but he talks about how if you work with your hands, rest with your mind. If you work with your mind, rest with your hands. And so if you do a lot of physical labor, Sabbath for you could look like, I just want to lay down and read a book, right? Or if you work with your mind a lot, Sabbath for you, like my husband really likes, after like a long week, he just likes to come home and just be messing with these animals. Like, that feels like Sabbath for him because he gets to work with his hands and do things like that. He even gives the example, which I never thought about, but always felt. If you are the primary parent and you're constantly with the children, resting for you looks like an email, being able to finally sit down and send an email. But he just talks about the different ways that a Sabbath can look. But the biggest thing is, y'all, our souls need rest. Now, here's the thing I was telling you about with the parents. He talks about a communal Sabbath and how this will help parents with young children. And I've always wondered, like, what does Sabbath look like for us? Because our kids don't let us sleep in. But I'm going to look at page 150 and 151. He said, communal Sabbaths change everything. Community can help you bear burdens in tough seasons so that you can Sabbath, even though a human life depends on you. Talking about moms. And he gives this example, like if you're all together, Sabbathing together, just the very nature of the older kids being able to play with other older kids, or if there's a grandma in the room, she's going to want to rock the baby. So just you being in the midst of other people, you're not constantly doing all of the pickup and the cleanup because y'all are all together and more people can share the burden. It gives you rest. Again, that takes intentionality. You have to go to someone's house. You have to be uncomfortable. They have to come to your house, be uncomfortable. But it is a way to get rest. And I wish I had that mindset, especially when all of my children were little. I can see how that would have restored my soul for the next week. So y'all, the main point is to Sabbath and rest and trust God with the rest, right? And this summer, I want to really become intentional about this with our family. Summer is more of our time of rest. We still are running 100 miles per hour, but our schedules allow us to be more intentional, to black out like a complete day, to rest as a family. And as we move into our busy season, where my husband, like I mentioned, is going to be working 7 days a week, I still feel as though we want to find a Sabbath. And so I'm thinking that we're going to really protect our Saturday evenings after he gets back from watching film and stuff like that. We will make sure that that's the time that we get to spend together as a family cooking dinner. And I want my kids to know. That's another thing. My husband and I will plan how we're going to Sabbath, but I want our children to know. He said for his kids, they would light a candle and be like, it's the Sabbath. And then they'll blow it out when the Sabbath is over, because I want my kids to see us intentionally leaning into rest so that they can intentionally lean into work when it's time to work, right? So they know we work hard, but we also honor the Lord with our Sabbath. Now, I will mention too, if you're watching this and you're like, well, I work 2 jobs, the brokenness of the world is real. The brokenness of sin is real. And so that has, like greed, all of that has affected people's ability to truly Sabbath, to truly rest in the Lord. But find those hours and start there and ask the Lord to provide so you can stretch it out. So find those hours for us is as soon as my husband walks through the door from film on Saturdays, we're shutting the world down. We're Sabbathing, however that looks, enjoying ourselves. Our kids are going to know it's fun time, nothing else. And there is an intentional preparation into the Sabbath that we will do. My kids and I will probably do on Fridays so that Saturday morning they can have Sabbath rest. And then what I might do, and it seems crazy, but pinch together that Sunday evening where my husband can have the rest of his Sabbath. So it's not legalism, right? It's just the intention, it's the heart, it's the mindset behind it. So these are the weekly rhythms and habits, and I pray this will be helpful for you. Y'all just implement a little bit at a time. Again, if you watch this even without watching the daily habits, go back and watch that. I encourage you to watch that. And that's all I have for you guys today. I love y'all, and I'll see you in the next episode.